Good evening. The hour of 6:30 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Planning Board. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other board members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. Will the staff please conduct roll call?
Certainly. Emily Levine Berner, Harold Farrington,
Here.
Ryan Clancy,
Here.
Roberto Mastrogiovanni,
Here.
David Orgaz,
Here.
Armando Rangel,
Here.
Mayor George Hansel,
Here.
Mike Remy, here, Gail Summers, Randon Markelson,
Here.
Tammy Adams, Kenneth Cost.
So now we move to the minutes of the previous meeting, April 24. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from April 24, 2023?
I have a motion, Mr. Chairman. I would move to approve the minutes of the April 24th meeting as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, or changes? Seeing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor? Minutes are approved. Now we move to final vote on conditional approvals. Does the staff have any applications tonight that are ready for a final vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do. Application S0223, the boundary line adjustment between the properties located at 0, 59, 60, and 67 Thompson Road. All conditions precedent for that application have been met, and staff recommend that the board act on final approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to issue final approval for S-02-23?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any discussion or edits? Hearing none, we'll take a vote on final approval for S-02-23. All those in favor? Final approval is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also have another application that's ready for final approval. It's going to be SPR 964, Modification 6. It's going to be for 120 Key Road, the proposed landscaping modifications. At this time, all the precedent conditions for this application have been met, and staff recommends the board act on final approval.
I have another note on this item. If there's another note on this item that staff is looking at an additional condition.
Oh, I guess staff is requesting that as a subsequent to the final approval for this application, that the owner's signature appear on the plan that's been submitted.
Okay, thank you. So is there a motion to issue final approval for SPR-964, modification number 7, with the condition subsequent that the property owner sign the final plans?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second, thank you. Any discussion or edits on this approval? Hearing none, we'll we'll take a vote, indicate approval.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Megan Fortson, Planning Technician. I just wanted to clarify that the first final approval that you just issued for the boundary line adjustment on Thompson Road, that was incorrectly listed as being project number S-02-23. It's actually S-01-23, so I apologize for the confusion. I just wanted to make it clear that that's the project that is receiving final approval tonight. It is the Thompson Road boundary line adjustment, though.
Okay, thank you. So,
Thank you.
please let the record show the correct number is S-01-23.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other final approvals?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is SPR-967, modification number 7A, site plan, railroad land parking lot landscaping modifications at 0 Cypress Street. The applicant and owner, Railroad Steel Condominium Association, proposes to remove and replace 7 trees with 34 shrubs on the property at 0 Cypress Street, TMP number 574-041-000. The site is 5.54 acres and is located in the downtown core district. Does staff have a recommendation for the completeness of this application?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Megan Fortson, the planning technician. The applicant has requested exemptions from submitting a grading plan, a lighting plan, elevations, and all technical reports. After reviewing each request, staff have determined that the requested exemptions would have no bearings on the merits of the application and recommend that the board accept the application as complete.
Thank you. May I ask for a motion to accept the application as complete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move to find the application complete.
Second.
Second, thank you. All in favor of accepting the application as complete? Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant to present on the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, my name is Keith Tebow. I work for Southwestern Community Services. Southwestern is the management agent for the railroad land condo where the co-op is, the Marriott, 51 Railroad Street, our building, and then some senior housing as well. We have a number of trees on one of the islands, very narrow island, that I've been watching just wither. We've tried our best to and our landscaping contractors tried our best to get them to thrive, but they've never thrived. And the consensus was that maybe that underlying railroad land really isn't conducive to trees being able to thrive. So what we've proposed to do is, or we'd like the ability to do, is to replace the trees on that one island with what is thriving on that land, and that's the dwarf inkberry bush that we've proposed. There's a number of those around the site. I provided some photographs that have thrived pretty well. So that's what we're looking to do. As I understand it, even without the 7 trees that have been removed, we still meet the minimum number of trees per the site plan approval. So we just want to be able to put something there that we think we have some evidence it'll grow. That being said, there is one condo member would like us to try to get a second opinion on the shade trees. So we are going to do that just to make sure we're not making a mistake there. And because we all would like to have shade trees, but it just doesn't seem like it's in the card. So we are gonna do that. But if that does fail, we'd like the ability to replace that trees on that island with inkberry bushes.
Do any of the board members have questions for the applicant?
Yes, Mr.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It might be in here, I haven't seen it. How tall do those inkberries grow? How,
They get to be about 6 feet,
6?
about 6 feet,
And are
yep.
they,
and they bush out, and they're like I said, they provide a barrier. They don't provide as much shade as the tree would ultimately, but they do provide a nice, attractive barrier, in my opinion.
I have a question myself. What's the timeline for your second opinion?
I'm gonna get something in the next 30 days. I just got a contact of someone I can talk to that might have some
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the board? Okay. At this time, I'd like to ask the staff to provide their comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the subject parcel is located directly to the east of Main Street and is the site of a former rail yard. It's 5.54 acres in size and is located in the downtown core district. The buildings on the parcel feature a variety of uses, from the Monadnock Food Co-op to the Marriott Building, offices for various uses, including the hospital, as well as residential living units. The development itself was originally approved by the Planning Board in June 2006, and several subsequent modifications to the original site plan have been approved for various changes on the site and to the buildings itself. As part of this application, the applicant is proposing to replace 7 trees that have already been removed with 34 dwarf inkberry shrubs in 2 existing interior parking lot landscaping islands on the eastern portion of the site. The landscaping on this portion of the site was approved as part of the original site plan application in 2006. City staff became aware that the trees had been removed in January of this year and let the property owner know that they would either need to replace the trees in kind or come back to the planning board for a landscaping modification to their approved plan. Section 20.5.5 of the Land Development Code states that minor revisions to approved landscaping plans can be approved by the Community Development Director, as long as the applicant can demonstrate that there will be no reduction in the quantity or size of plant material, that there will be no change to the approved location of plant materials, and that the proposed plants are of the same general category. Given that the applicant is proposing to change the category and number of plants that are proposed to be installed in place of the trees, this project meets the threshold for review by the Planning Board. So in terms of the applicable site development standards that are relevant to this application, Section 9.4.5.a of the Land Development Code outlines our landscaping standards for parking lots with 10 or more parking spaces. As can be seen in the agenda packet that was sent out, the applicant has submitted an existing conditions exhibit showing that there are currently 172 parking spaces on the site and 33 remaining trees left on the site following the removal of the 7 trees. This plan is included as an attachment to the staff report, like I mentioned. This number of parking spaces would require that 18 trees be planted on the site. It's a ratio of 1 tree required per 10 parking spaces. So given that the applicant has planted more than the minimum required number of trees, that standard appears to be met. The only other relevant site development standard is from Article 20.5 of the Land Development Code, which basically breaks down all of your landscaping standards. So as was explained by Mr. Tebow, the narrative that was submitted by the applicant states that these trees never thrived in their current location and were removed because of it. He had noted that one of the possible reasons that the trees failed to thrive could potentially be that the underlying surface of the former rail yard was not conducive to the growth and development of the trees. The narrative went on to state that the members of the condo association, as he noted, have noticed that dwarf inkberry shrubs have thrived in other areas of the site. And he also noted that members of the condo association have gone back and forth as to whether they would like to see shade trees planted in these locations again, or if they are happier having a shrub that would survive, like the dwarf inkberry. He also noted that he didn't believe that any salt or other roadside pollution played a role in the decline of the trees, and that he believes that the underlying soil conditions under the top 12 to 18 inches of soil provided are not suitable for the sustained growth of the trees. Section 20.5.2 of the Land Development Code outlines the landscaping installation requirements for plantings, including the requirement that trees be planted utilizing the best available practices to develop essential root structure, that plant materials be installed in a soil of sufficient volume composition and nutrient balance, and that trees installed in areas of non-native or compacted soil shall be excavated to enable the placement of 300 cubic feet of native soil, and that protective measures be installed around existing landscaping to protect them during the installation of new landscaping. The board may want to consider making the submittal of a security on behalf of the applicant a condition of approval, just to ensure that once the new landscaping is installed, that it will survive, and if it doesn't survive, that it will be replaced. Staff have provided a recommended motion to the board in the agenda packet, but it should be noted that the applicant will need to come back before the board if they do decide to install more shade trees versus if they are just proposing to install the dwarf inkberry shrubs as currently proposed. So you'll want to clarify that with the applicant.
Thank you, Megan. Does anyone on the board have a question for the staff?
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, if this application moves forward as originally presented and is approved with the inkberry bushes, if the applicant later decides that he wants to install shade trees instead of the bushes, he will have to come back and do this all over again. It may be prudent to table this application to allow time for the applicant to get his second opinion, and then he can amend his submittal if it does become revealed that different trees would fit.
Counselor Remy?
Thank you. Question, I think, for staff on that. If he was to just not complete the conditions precedent, wouldn't his existing approval stand where he has shade trees, and it would go back to being a departmental approval if they were similar?
If he wanted to let
size
it
and function?
time out in the 180 days, right? So he would have to wait 180 days for his approval to expire.
Alternatively, and I'm sort of doing this on the fly, so you guys correct me if I'm wrong here, but he could, you could, go ahead, you could request approval from us for replacing the existing trees with a different species of tree, because that would meet the administrative approval guideline that says similar size, similar type. And so, but you're right, he would have to sort of,
And then
he would have to withdraw from,
if that became the case, he would withdraw this application before you currently, and then staff would handle the change in shade tree potentially administratively. But if the approval goes, to reiterate, if the approval goes forward tonight, it's gonna have to be those inkberry bushes.
Counselor Remy?
Follow-up, thank you for that feedback. Is there a way we could modify the application to just say, or allow it to go back to staff as approval? Or go back to the existing
This
condition?
application wasn't advertised, we don't have any materials related to what those trees might be.
yeah. We'd have to make a determination that it does actually meet the size
Size,
and
yeah.
type.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Hansel?
If the applicant's okay with coming back, then I would move to table this until our June meeting.
Second.
Yep, June 26th will be
June
the June planning
26th.
board meeting, yep.
So I'd move to table this item until the June 26th meeting of the Keene Planning Board.
Second.
Well, I think that would, if the applicant was okay with it.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
You did, okay, sorry, I was looking at you, not him. Okay, so we have a motion to continue this to next meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of continuing? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Does that obviate the need for a public comments?
We'll still have to do that at the next meeting.
Yeah, that's fine,
But
but
that'll
for
give
tonight it is.
the applicant a
Okay.
little more time, yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is S-03-23, Conservation Residential Development Subdivision, and SWP-CUP 2022-03 Surface Water Protection Conditional Use Permit for 19 Whitcomb's Mill Road. The applicant and owner, Sandra R. Henry Trust, proposes to subdivide the 12.42 acre parcel located at 19 Whitcomb's Mill Road, TMP number 237-018-000, into 9 lots, including 8 residential building lots that range in size from 0.38 to 0.77 acres, and 1 open space lot that is 6.83 acres in size. 4 lots are proposed to be developed as duplexes, and 4 lots are proposed to be developed as single-family homes. A new dead-end road is proposed to provide access to 7 of the residential lots. Access to the 8th residential lot is proposed from Whitcomb's Mill Road. A waiver is requested from section 19.3.5.A.3 of the Land Development Code regarding the requirement that all structures shall be accessed from internal streets. The site is located in the low-density 1 district. Does staff have a recommendation for completeness of the application?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant requests exemptions from submitting a landscaping plan, lighting plan, building elevations, historic evaluation, screening analysis, and an architectural and visual appearance analysis. After reviewing each request, staff recommend that the board grant the requested exemptions as they have no bearing on the merits of the application and accept the application as complete.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the application as complete?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of accepting the motion as complete? Okay, the application is complete. I would invite you to, the applicant to present at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Fippard. I'm here on behalf of the landowner, the Sandra R. Henry Trust. The property before you is shaded in green. This is the same plan that's in your plan sets. It's just colored to make it easier for you to see and understand. Along the right-hand side, the east side of the site, is the existing Whitcomb's Mill Road. And to the south is the Cheshire Rail Trail. On the west side, there is an agricultural property. It's the pig farm on Arch Street. To the north is White Brook, which drains from west to east, and is residential property. There's a residential property here, across Whitcomb's Mill Road, east of the site, and then this is Langdon Place of Keene, directly across the street. This property is 12.4 acres approximately. It was rezoned from rural and one corner was actually zoned to agriculture, to low-density 1 last year. And we have been working on plans for residential development of this property actually for many years. And as the regulations started changing, the owners waited and waited for the CRD regulations to become finalized, along with all the amendments that took place. So we're finally here. I'll be glad to get this project off my work list. As I said, it's 12.4 acres of existing property. This property used to be a gravel pit. The entire property was stripped of vegetation back in the 50s and 60s. Arthur Whitcomb Company operated this as a gravel pit, along with the property across the street where Langdon Place of Keene is located today. And you'll notice on the Langdon Place property, there's very steep slopes around the perimeter of the property where it meets the rail trail. That's because of the gravel pit operation that took place there for decades. In the 1980s, Whitcomb's discontinued operation of the gravel pit. But at that time, the site was essentially void of vegetation. There wasn't a tree left internally on the property. There was a pond in this area back in the 80s. At some point, the berm on the north side of the pond breached, either from overtopping in a heavy rain or I'm not sure what happened, but it essentially drained the pond down to what it is today. If you go to the site, and we've done test pits all over the site, the permanent water table is the elevation of the wetland. That water is there year-round. We've never seen it lower. We've done test pits as deep as 25 feet in this area. We did not hit ledge, or it was all pretty much a profile of sands and gravels. So I can see why it was operated as a gravel pit. And back in those days, they used to remove material down and until they hit water, and then they stopped. And about the only regulations in place in the state of New Hampshire back in the 50s and 60s said they couldn't excavate below water table. So they stopped, and then they would go to the center of the property, create a pond area, and then work the rest of the property around the pond and direct runoff into the pond area. So that's how they did sediment control. And that worked for decades, but when they abandoned the operation of the gravel pit, it started to grow fallow, and vegetation came back. For those of you who made it to the site visit last week, you could see now it's a treed property. It's probably 98% vegetated with very little open gravel faces anywhere on the property. There are still steep slopes up against the rail trail and next to the agricultural property. And there's several steep slope areas spread around the property, which are just piles of topsoil and different soils that, for one reason or another, they left behind. Those areas are all man-made. They're not naturally occurring slopes. The city engineer visited the site and examined them and determined it's exempt from the steep slope ordinance because they're man-made piles, not naturally occurring. So recognizing all that, we're proposing a CRD that would allow up to 12 residential units. And I say up to because if you look closely at the regulations for a CRD, they require a minimum lot size of 16,000 square feet. And within that 16,000 square feet, you can do any of the listed permitted uses. And the listed permitted uses include single-family homes and duplexes, two-family homes. So actually, any one of these lots we're proposing, except for the open space lot, they could build a duplex. We just can't exceed 12 total units on the property. Our intent is to get lots approved. We're not building buildings that we're offering for sale. So our intent is we want 8 residential lots. The larger lots are intended to accommodate a duplex, and the smaller lots are intended to accommodate a single-family home. And that's our approach in this design. We've identified good building sites in all of these locations. It was a little challenging. We recognized we had to save at least 50% we had to set aside as permanent open space. And there had to be primary conservation values to justify preserving that land area. So obviously the large wetland area, and this is 1.9 acres in the center of the property, is our primary conservation resource. And all of that wetland area is proposed to be within our permanent open space land. That land area is about 6.8 acres of land, so it's a little more than half the lot, and that way it complies with the CRD regulations. Along with that wetland area, there are wetland buffers that are required to be identified on our plans, and I've done that. If you can see the very dark lines, bold lines, those are the proposed lot lines. So a landowner can come in, buy a lot, and then hire a contractor and build a house. Within some of those lots, you see this other dashed line, which is curvilinear, passing parallel to those. Those are portions of the wetland buffer. And the wetland buffer extends 30 feet beyond the edge of the wetland. So it projects into lot 1 on 2 sides, projects into the corner of lot 2, projects into one side of lot 6, and then the back corners of lots 7 and 8. In order to allow that and to construct a new road into the property that actually crosses a portion of that buffer area where there's an existing culvert, we needed to apply for a surface water conditional use permit. And we did. We filed that application. We met with the Conservation Commission last Monday. We did a site visit. Most of the commission members attended. And we walked the site through this area, looking at the existing wetlands and looking at the buffer areas as well. We then went back to the Conservation Commission meeting, and they made their recommendation, which staff will probably summarize. I don't want to speak for them. But they recommended that the planning board could issue a conditional use permit for this property. However, they requested that we restrict any of the development lots containing portions of that wetland buffer, and we identify them on the plan as a no-cut zone. So they want to continue to let them go fallow with scrub, shrub, and trees and vegetation, not to be disturbed by the future homeowners on the property. Along with our proposed development, we're creating a homeowners association, the Wickham Mill Estates Homeowners Association. The Homeowners Association will own the open space land. It'll be deeded to them. So each of the unit owners will have 1/12 interest if 12 units get built in that ownership of primarily the wetland areas, but also most of the wetland buffers. And let me back up a second. We are proposing a new city street to be constructed in this area, and that wasn't my intent originally. When I started all this years ago, under the old regulations, we could propose a subdivision with a private road. And the private road had to be approved by the planning board and by Public Works as a subdivision road. And being the old timer, and that's what I knew. I mean, I've been doing this over 40 years. I knew I could do that. When we adopted the new regulations under the Land Development Code, it still has that language, a new city street or an approved subdivision road, but the definition changed. And when the definition changed, and I'm still trying to track down who did it, it must have been Tom Mullins. When the definition changed, it says if you want to create a lot to sell, it has to have frontage on a Class 5 city street. So that's where they got me. So my private road went away, and I now had to make this a city street. It's built the same. We use the same standards, the same pavement thickness, same drainage systems. It's no different, only the Henrys, the landowners, wanted to control it. They wanted to be able to gate their private road at some point in the future. And once they had units sold and had homeowners involved, they wanted to offer that as a means of keeping their neighborhood private. And so we lost that option when we decided to make it a city street. So now it'll never have a gate on it as long as it's a city street. I could have gone to the zoning board and applied for variance to vary from the regulation, but I'm in front of the zoning board 3 or 4 times a month now. I didn't want to add another variance, especially when the regulation's brand new. So we talked to the realtors, we talked to 3 different builders who were interested, and they all actually preferred a city street. So that was the final decision, so we went with the city street. So I will be petitioning the city council to lay out a city street, to accept a deed, and take all the steps necessary to complete this. We'll have to post a bond to guarantee that it'll be constructed and it will meet all the city standards. So our city street now provides access to Lot 1, Lot 2, Lot 3, Lot 4, 5, 6, and Lot 7. However, Lot 8 has to front on a Class 5 road, so I had to give Lot 8 a minimum of 40 feet of frontage on Wickham's Mill Road. So that's why we have this odd little finger sticking out. And that's where I'm proposing, coincidentally in that location, a driveway. I applied for a waiver because our CRD regulations require access to any new lot to be from the new interior road, not from the existing city street. So I've applied for a waiver to allow a single driveway in this location that could serve a maximum of 2 dwelling units. if a duplex is built on lot 8, but it may not be. It depends on who buys it and what they want to build. In speaking to the builders and the realtors, there's a tremendous amount of interest for more lots. And some of them are people who want a single-family home. Others are people who want a duplex. They want single-level living. Most of these are older buyers. They already live in town. They want to sell their existing properties in town and build a new place here in a single level, and they want to be able to go south in the winter. And they feel safe in a duplex because usually somebody else is there on the property, and they know right away if something fails, if the heating system's not working or there's some other failure. So it's been a very successful marketing strategy. We did Gateway Preserve in Chesterfield. We did 13 duplexes, 26 units. They all sold out in a year. They're all occupied. Many of them have changed hands. And then when the prices went crazy, their value skyrocketed. So we're anxious to get going on this project now. We've waited long enough. Sooner or later, this market is not going to continue at the rate it's been going. I know there's a pent-up demand in Keene, so we're anxious to start this. I'm hoping the council doesn't go on vacation on me in August before they vote on this road layout, Mr. Mayor. So please put that in your notes. I'm anxious for this to come forward. Back to the conditional use permit, to allow the road to cross portions of the wetland buffer and to allow portions to remain on these lots with the restriction that they be no cut zones. If you want, I'll go through all 15 criteria that the Conservation Commission considered. I don't want to take up all the planning board time to do that if I don't have to. As I said, I'm going to just summarize it real quickly for you. There are many different types of wetlands. This is a good primary important wetland because it's at the water table, it's the permanent water table, and it's forested. So it provides habitat, it provides a source of food, of shelter for many different animals. And I've seen many different animals all the times I've been out on this site. But the buffer areas, because they fell within the gravel pit, and they were stripped of vegetation and disturbed, they're only now just starting to get vegetation. These owners have gone around in these areas and spread loam themselves and grass to revegetate the conservation mix. And that was a good positive step because that prevented a lot of erosion from going into these areas and ending up in the wetland. So that helped to preserve the primary wetland functions and values here. But the buffers today, they do more than they used to do, but just 5 years ago, they did very little, almost nothing. The second primary resource is an intermittent stream that comes from land to the south, actually originates up at Route 9. There's a culvert under Route 9 that passes down parallel to Wickham's Mill Road through another former gravel pit, goes under the rail trail through a stone culvert here, and then ends up in our wetland area on the property. So I showed all that to the Conservation Commission. They agreed the buffers in their current state aren't a valuable resource, and staff will summarize what their recommendation was to you. But we're agreeable to put the restriction in the covenants, along with our open space restrictions, that these are no-cut zones where they fall on any of the development lots. Just so you have a complete knowledge of what's ahead, when I petition the city council, which I hope is in another couple of weeks, for the road layout, we're gonna ask for several waivers from them. We don't wanna put in street lights, we don't wanna put in a sidewalk. There are no sidewalks anywhere near here on Wickham's Mill Road. I think the closest sidewalk is probably down where I live on Arch Street, a mile away, and it ends there. So there's no reason to put it here. We are proposing a pedestrian footpath in this area from our road up to the rail trail. And I'm applying, the state of New Hampshire owns the rail trail in this location, so I have to apply to them for a license to connect a footpath to the rail trail. And they were very nice to me, very nice to deal with. And I said to them, you know, I'm on the rail trail all the time, I live near here, and I see footpaths from properties all over the place. And to my knowledge, none of them applied for a license. And because I asked, and the city engineer recommended, we have to go through the process. So this footpath may or may not be constructed. I have to pay the application fee. There's an annual fee that has to be paid every year in order to have that footpath connection. I don't know what they would do if the homeowners don't pay the annual fee. It's $50 a year. I don't know why we have to go through it. But anyway, I'm making you aware I have to do that. So, but I'm hoping it occurs. They're gonna do it with or without it. And I was trying to make it safer so they don't have to walk up the road. Whitcomb's Mill Road is narrow. It's not in the best condition. I don't think it's been repaved in 20 or 30 years. It leads down to a single-lane bridge just north of the property. People come down this hill pretty fast, too fast, and don't slow down until they get to the bridge. So I was more comfortable proposing a footpath rather than having them try to walk up the side of the road to get to the rail trail. So that was my thinking. We're not proposing to cut any trees. We'll meander through the trees in this area and just keep it a narrow footpath, safe for foot traffic. We are proposing a waiver of street trees. Because this is a forested site, planting trees here really doesn't accomplish much. It's going to get lost because it's surrounded by trees. And this area will be permanently forested, as will this. Just didn't make sense to spend money on a tree every 50 feet when you're not really even going to see it. So no sidewalk, no street trees, no underground conduits for electrical and communication systems, which makes sense downtown. But out here, we're going to have overhead power coming into the site and then underground to each of the building sites, which is consistent with the whole neighborhood. We didn't want the street lights that are required, and there's adequate light up at the intersection already from Langdon Place. And I didn't read the light levels, but it was more than adequate so you can see the intersection. And this intersection has been here. The gravel road leading into the site is this exact location. And it made sense to use it because the line of sight was good in both directions, and it's lit by the Langdon Place access point. So we wanted to keep the atmosphere here more rural. And it's very dark at night now in this area, so I'm trying hard to keep it that way. So no additional street lights along the road. And that's not your decision, that'll be city council, but we are requesting that waiver. I think I've covered it, so if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Jim. At this time, I'd ask if any board members have questions for the applicant. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to, might be wrong, is it lot 8? You mentioned lot 8 needing the, is that number 9? On my chart, it's 9.
I hope you didn't get one of the old plans. I probably have 15 versions of this, and I think we turned in a different version with the initial application, had to correct it to provide frontage for this lot. And then we made this part of the open space land. So I lost the lot that was here, and I expanded lot 8 to make up for it.
We do have a couple different versions in
Yeah,
our
Vice Chair,
packet.
the page C1 of the plan set includes lot 8 with the connection to the.
Okay, I didn't see that. Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did see the site, and it is quite nice in there, quite conducive for some type of development, it seems, and the water level is high. Concern about the one-lane bridge down the road, its condition and its weight limits, et cetera, for emergency. What is the status? Is that anything?
To my knowledge, there is no plan. It's not in the CIP to replace that bridge. City engineer and the public works director have assured me it's gonna remain a one-lane bridge. It's obviously emergency vehicles, concrete trucks, you know, anything weighing 80,000 pounds is gonna have to use Route 9 and the south leg of Wickham's Mill Road to service this site. And the fire chief has already acknowledged that emergency access will come from Route 9 into the site. The bridge, when I was in engineering school, getting my master's degree, structures wasn't my favorite class, but we did do problems with structures and trucks and bridges and how you classify bridges. So this span is so short that I'm sure a concrete truck could drive across it with no problem, because it never feels the whole load. The front tires are on the bridge. I mean, it's only 12 feet wide. The truck is 18 feet wide. The rear wheels aren't even on the bridge. And then when the rear wheels get on, the front tires are off the bridge. So as long as they keep moving, I have complete confidence that that single lane bridge in its current condition will provide safe access from the north. But as I said, the fire chief already recognized that limitation. He won't use it. If he responds, he's sending fire trucks up Route 9 to get here. And actually, I'm glad you raised that, because we did talk about fire protection. Initially, I wanted to put in a fire pond. We got a permanent water source right here that I thought was very viable. If you build a pond correctly, it'll work, and it'll provide access year-round with adequate water. So I started that process by applying for a wetlands permit. And when you apply for a wetlands permit at New Hampshire DES, one of the first things you do is contact the Natural Heritage Bureau. You identify the site and you request from them, is this site a site known for historical artifacts or an archaeological site? Is it a site with an endangered species or a threatened species? And we got a hit. We got a response back that there was a threatened plant species that was spotted in 1971, somewhere within a quarter mile of our site. Again, I immediately called up and said, can you send me latitude and longitude? Because today, when you identify a resource like that, they ask for latitude and longitude so they can locate it exactly. In 1971, all they could say was, it's within a quarter mile of our site. So I hired a botanist to go to the site to look for the fringed gentian, which is a plant, looks like an iris to me, but it's a rare threatened species in New Hampshire. And I contacted, actually, Sarah Bradeen. Many of you may know her. She runs Windsock Gardens by the airport in Swansea. Well, it turns out she has a botany degree from Cornell University, and she grows gentians on her property. She knew exactly what it was. So we went to the site, I think it was November 3rd, and we walked back and forth through the entire wetland area, because that's where the plant would be. And she knew exactly what to look for, and she's showing me the number of nodes and the number of leaves. That's not it. This is a different type of gentian. That's not the fringed gentian. And she found nothing. We reported that back to Concord at the Natural Heritage Bureau, and they said, well, you were too late. So we asked that sites be inspected during the month of September and October. And because we went out November 3rd, it was too late, and they wouldn't accept our findings, so we were prohibited from proceeding with a wetland application. So that eliminated my fire pond unless we wanted to wait a year. So we decided we're gonna go with in-home residential sprinkler systems. So they put in a pump and a tank, and they put the sprinkler system in the house when they build it. And that's our best option, otherwise we lose another year. And we didn't want to wait a year, given the conditions in the market. It's probably too much information, but this is the type of stuff that happens. Drives you crazy. And I see in the recommended conditions that they require that we put that type of sprinkler system, make it a requirement in the subdivision. So a note will be added to the plan We will put it in the documents that get recorded with the homeowners association documents. That gets registered with the state, gets recorded at the registry of deed, and it runs with the land. So that guarantees the open space stays open space, that it never gets cut unless it's a diseased tree or some danger that requires something to be cut. But other than that, its intent is to stay permanently vegetated in its existing condition. So we agree to the additional requirements listing the in-home sprinkler systems.
Thank you. Any other board members have questions? Ryan?
Can you clarify the no-cut zone? Is it just the wetland area, or is it all the common area?
It would be the wetland buffer. So it's not a wetland, but it's the upland area adjacent to the wetland, and it's 30 feet from the edge of the wetland. So in this case, it's the intermittent stream, and 30 feet into the lot area, which is primarily the setback area anyway, 20 feet is. So it's just a restriction that the homeowner has to respect. What I've learned over the years doing this is that properties that have homeowners association are much better regulated, because there's all these residents that are sharing responsibility, and there's always somebody who takes charge and polices the neighborhood and makes sure everybody's following the rules. As the owners change hands, they'll sit them down, educate the new owners that these are restrictions, we take it seriously. It's just much better enforced. If we didn't have a homeowners association, I mean, within 5 years, they'd have gazebos and they'd be using those areas. And it's just much better enforced.
Councilor Remy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may be for you, maybe for staff, but I know you were stating a limitation on the number of total units on the space, but I'm trying to understand how that would be regulated if these lots were created. What would prevent them from being all duplexes in the future?
Well, fourth floor regulates it. You can't build anything without getting a permit from the fourth floor. They keep property records, so they'll pull the property file. If there's already 11 units and somebody bought this and said, I want to do a duplex, they're going to say, you either have to go to the zoning board and get a variance, or go back to planning board, or change the zone. It's the underlying zoning that controls the number of units. But it was, I mean, my eyes got opened very late in the game that in the LD1 zone, the way the limitations are written, duplex is listed as a permitted use. And the only requirement is you have a minimum lot size of 16,000 square feet. In my mind, I needed 32,000 square feet in order to do a duplex. And they're saying no. Shock to me, I think it was a mistake. I mean, I was in the group, I often sat next to George, discussing all these changes in the land development code. I have no idea where that came from. I don't know. It may be a mistake. It's the only residential zone worded that way. Every other residential zone, it's 8,000 square feet per unit, 5,000 square feet per unit. So I suspect it's one that just got passed.
My point to that being, once these are individual lots, at this point, they're all, it's one big lot, so you can regulate it, but once they're individual lots, I'm not familiar enough with the mechanism to enforce that once 8 different people own them.
So, Jesse Rounds, Community Development Director. Jim brought this up to us. We were looking at the regulations. We talked to our plans examiner and our building official. And when a building permit comes in, part of their process is to check all of the planning documents, including the subdivision and the CRD. And so they would see that limitation on the number of units at that point. And so it would be the first people in the door would have the opportunity, and yeah.
That was my interpretation, is that it was a race to the door. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions the board has for you now.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask the staff for their comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Evan Clements, planner. I will try to be brief. Mr. Fippard's presentation, as always, is very thorough. Again, this is a 12.42 acre tract of land. It is located north of Route 9 and on the west side of Whitcombs Mill Road. There are existing surface waters on the site, including an intermittent stream and a large established wetland area. The proposal includes 4 single-family lots and 4 duplex lots, but as just stated, that might shift a little bit. It'll be 12 residential dwellings total. A waiver is requested from Section 1935A3A of the Land Development Code regarding the requirement that all structures be accessed from interior streets. That will be something that the board will need to act on as part of this application. All the lots appear to meet the requirements of the zoning regulations of the CRD dimensional standards. They will all have frontage on either an existing Class 5 road or a street with an approved subdivision plan. The standard appears to be met. In regards to the character of the land for subdivision, the land proposed to be subdivided is not located within a flood hazard area. There are some man-made steep slopes present on the site that will be regraded as part of the proposal and future development of the individual building lots. This standard appears to be met. In regards to 1923, scattered or premature development, the proposed development is located off of an existing city street in an area of the city that is zoned for residential development. Staff has no concerns about the potential impact of this development on the capacity of the school system, adequacy of access streets, and the availability of other public services. Fire access to the site is restricted due to the weight and capacity limits of the one-lane bridge, and emergency access will be provided from the south via Route 9. Preservation of existing features. All significant existing features have been identified and are discussed later in regards to the design criteria of the CRD. There are no special flood hazard areas. As Mr. Fippard stated, in regards to fire protection and water supply, this applicant is offering to do individual sprinkler systems as a way to meet the standard, as well as the requirements of the Fire and Life Safety Code. I will get more into that in a minute. In regards to utilities, the applicant proposes to extend the existing sewer line located on the Langdon Place of Keene property to Whitcombs Mill Road, down the length of proposed new road in order to provide sewer service to the new city lots. The city of Keene has an easement on the Langdon Place of Keene property that allows for this extension to occur, and private individual wells are proposed to provide domestic water service to each individual building lot. Okay, in regards to the design criteria for the CRD, the general criteria is that the development shall be located outside of primary conservation areas and shall minimize impact to any identified secondary conservation areas. The identified primary conservation areas for this property include surface waters and their buffers, such as intermittent streams, wetland complex, and White Brook, and the floodway associated with White Brook. Steep slopes were also identified on the topo survey. However, after conducting a site visit on May 11th, the city engineer has determined that these areas consist of stockpiled materials left over from previous uses on the site and are not natural features, subject to the Hillside Protection Overlay District. So as such, the applicant has submitted a hillside conditional use permit. However, both the city engineer and the zoning administrator have determined that a hillside protection CUP is not required for this proposal. All the surface waters in the floodway are located on the proposed open space lot, with the exception of a small area of wetlands that are within the right-of-way of the proposed road. The applicant has submitted a surface water protection conditional use permit application for this impact. The board will need to act on that in conjunction with the overall application. The 30-foot surface water buffer is located on several of the proposed lots, as the applicant had described. Okay, so in regards to the waiver, the board will need to find that specific circumstances relative to the subdivision or conditions of the land in such subdivision indicate that a waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations in regards to the driveway off of Whitcomb's Mill, as opposed to off of the newly constructed road. And 2, granting the waiver will not increase the potential for creating adverse impacts to abutters, the community, or the environment. And 3, consideration will also be given as to whether strict conformity with the regulation would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant. Okay, the open space standards and ownership and maintenance. So all the land designated as open space shall not be further subdivided and shall remain as open space in perpetuity. In addition, all designated open space must be permanently protected by covenants or easements and shall be deeded to and maintained by the homeowners association as described by the applicant. So the applicant will be required to submit written documentation of any legal instruments required for the management of the designated open space, and such documents shall be subject to the review and approval of the city attorney prior to signature of the planning board. So that will be, it's one of the conditions of approval for this application. I'm going to blast through some site development standards. So in regards to drainage and stormwater management, stormwater runoff for the new road is proposed to be directed into a vegetated swales that will treat runoff and allow it to infiltrate into the ground. The cul-de-sac is proposed to be curbed. The stormwater runoff from this area will be directed into a detention basin. In regards to sediment and erosion control, the applicant proposes to use perimeter controls, including silt fencing and a stabilized construction entrance to prevent sedimentation and siltation from leaving the site. Snow storage and removal, this will be maintained by the city, and winter operations will manage it. Landscaping, no landscaping is proposed, and the applicant intends to request a waiver from city council regarding street trees. Screening, there's a proposal to screen the development and adjacent land uses with existing mature forest canopy that will be preserved as a buffer around the development in the open space lot. No lighting is proposed. Sewer and water I spoke about earlier. It'll be city sewer and private individual wells for water. So traffic and access management. So as described, the majority of the lots will receive their access from the newly constructed road, with one being access off of Whitcomb Mill itself. A condition of approval for this application will be the applicant obtaining all waivers required for from the city council to construct the street as described by Mr. Fippard. If the applicant is denied any of the required waivers, the street design and subdivision plan may need to be modified to meet city code. So in respect to traffic generation itself, the applicant submitted a traffic analysis which states that 8 detached single-family homes and 4 attached single-family homes, i.e. 2 duplexes, would generate a total of 106 trips per day. The analysis concludes that the overall development is expected to generate approximately 8 vehicle trips with 1 arrival and 7 departures during the AM peak hour, and 10 vehicle trips, 6 arrivals, 4 departures during the worst-case PM peak hour period. City engineering staff did not express any concern about this level of traffic generation or its impacts on the surrounding street network and nearby intersections and bridges. However, it should be noted that the one-way bridge on Whitcomb's Mill Road has weight limits and is not planned to be replaced. Any heavy equipment and or heavy-duty vehicles will be required to access the site from the south via Route 9. Filling and excavation, nothing is proposed within the wetlands themselves. There is a significant amount of material existing that is stockpiled on the site that I believe the applicant intends to use some of as subgrade for the road itself. The applicant does note that approximately 1,200 cubic yards of material will be hauled either to or from the site. Considering its proximity to Route 9, it shouldn't have an undue impact on traffic patterns. In regards to hazardous toxic materials, the standard is not applicable. Noise, the applicant states that the project narrative that no excessive noises will result from this proposal, and it'll meet the city noise ordinance. And architectural and visual appearance, the standard does not apply for single and two-family development. Okay, I'm gonna go over all the motions, but does anybody have, any board members have any questions before I get into the conditions of approval and the motion?
Mr. Orgaz.
Thank you. I do have one more regarding the fire suppression. Is the HOA required to have those inspected by the individual homeowners regularly?
The HOA won't be responsible for the fire system. The individual property owners will be. It's sort of an interesting situation. The RSA regarding single and two-family fire sprinkler systems states that a planning board cannot require such a system to be installed as part of a subdivision. However, an applicant can offer that as a means to meet the fire code. Staff have been sort of racking our brains on how to articulate that on the plan and to make sure that initial and future building owners are aware of that responsibility. And it will be the responsibility of the property owner to maintain that system in good working order.
And what if it is not maintained by the homeowner?
I mean, are you asking me to
Well, it seem-
speculate a worst-case scenario?
Well, it seems that it's just being put in to be able to move forward with the project. I'm just concerned with a fire truck at, say, Arch Street and Hastings Avenue, where it would have to travel to get there without the access of that bridge on Whitcomb's Mill is quite a distance, down Bradford and West Street and Base Hill and way up. That just concerns me.
That's correct, and I understand that. I don't really want to speculate. There is a certain limitation to rural living and fire protection. In a lot of cases, in smaller towns, the volunteer fire department will get to your house when they can with the intent to control the fire to make sure that it doesn't spread. And it can't really be their responsibility to save the building itself. This is something that is allowed in our regulations, and it's allowed via state law. So if the applicant wants to offer it as an option, it meets it, and the fire chief has gone along with it.
Any other questions for staff?
Okay, let me just get through the conditions of approval. So precedent conditions, owner signature, submittal of hard copies, recording fees, inspection of lot monuments by the Public Works Director once they've been installed. We're going to require that any draft documentation, any legal instrument, be it the HOA restrictive covenants, the no-cut zone easement, the open space restrictions, staff is going to want to see a copy of that to be reviewed by the city attorney before those are recorded and before this body will sign the plan. The applicant shall revise the subdivision plan to indicate those no-cut zones, and then note a provision granting authority to the homeowners association to maintain and regulate those no-cut zones. So as Mr. Fipper described, anybody in this neighborhood who notices that somebody has cut into these no-cut zones can let the HOA know, and then it becomes the HOA's responsibility to remediate that in a way they see fit. So in accordance with RSA 674-36-4, as written on today, May 22nd, 2023, the applicant has offered to install fire suppression sprinkler systems in the proposed buildings. A note shall be added to the subdivision plan which states the installation of individual residential sprinkler systems meeting the standards of NFPA 13D or NFPA 13R or some other means of fire protection approved by the Keene Planning Board shall be required for each individual lot shown on the plan. So what the RSA states is, if the sprinkler system is offered, the owner has to do it or has to come back to the planning board and say, I don't want to do a sprinkler system, this is how I'm going to meet the fire protection standards. And then that will be reviewed at a later date as an amendment to this subdivision for that specific lot. The applicant shall obtain approval from the City of Keene City Council for all necessary waivers for the road, street standards. The applicant shall obtain approval for the layout of the road and post a security adequate for the construction of the same to be approved by the city engineer and the community development director. And then subsequent to final approval, prior to commencing construction of the road, community development is going to be notified that all erosion control measures are installed and we're going to inspect it. The applicant shall obtain final acceptance of the new street to the city, and then prior to the issuance of a CO for each lot, the submittal of written documentation of a restricted covenant or other legal mechanism in the chain of title for each new proposed lot to ensure that the installation of individual residential sprinkler systems meeting the standards of the fire code or other means of fire protection approved by you guys shall be required. This documentation shall be subject to review and approval by the city council. As you can tell, staff has sort of been concerned about those sprinklers, so we're trying to lock it in as best as we can that the initial owner and all future owners will be aware of their obligations and their options moving forward. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Before I invite the public, there's quite a few folks here. Can I just see a quick show of hands of people who intend to make a comment on this project? Okay, great. All right, good. Okay, Councilor Remy?
Just one question for staff. One of the fire department comments was around the ability to turn around on the site. Has that been addressed or resolved?
I don't believe the applicant has submitted a truck turning plan. However, the fact that the city is going to, the road is going to be built to city spec. So that that cul-de-sac should be of sufficient dimension to allow emergency vehicles to navigate around it.
Okay.
That the city engineering department sets the city spec so that that can happen.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I would like to invite anyone who would like to comment. Please come forward and state your name and address, sir.
I'm Walter Lacey, 230 Daniels Hill Road in Keene. I'd like to address the major traffic safety issue concerning this project, which is yet to be discussed. Tough to get old here. This development will expose 12 households, their visitors, tradespeople, and vendors to the hazardous intersection of Whitcombs Mill Road and New Hampshire Route 9, which will be the primary route of traffic to and from the city for those folks. As a little background, in the late 50s, Route 9 was part of a bypass road network around Keene. At that time, all traffic between Keene and Brattleboro went via Arch Street and under the Arch Railroad Bridge. Since then, as traffic has gradually increased, problems have arisen at various points along Route 9. Locally, we have seen the Base Hill Road intersection modified twice, most recently because of a fatal accident. The Route 9 Whitcombs Mill Road intersection became dangerous with increased Route 9 traffic, and the residents who use the intersection complained to Senator Sanders, who was the DOT district engineer. I have copies of some of those communications. After no measures have been taken to improve safety and seemingly an accident a month, I communicated with Mr. Sanders' successor, John Calfeltz, January of 2020. Mr. Calfeltz got the ball rolling to involve the Southwest Regional Planning Commission, J.B. Mack, and put me in touch with William Lambert, a state DOT official. It looked as though a road safety audit was going to happen, but this was March 2020. The pandemic brought traffic to a halt, so any study would be meaningless. In July 2020, Mr. Lambert emailed me that possibly a dedicated turning lane could be incorporated, but not until the next repaving. Early last year, I learned that repaving was scheduled for later in the year, and February 23rd, I spoke on the phone with Mr. Kalfeltz and asked about the turning lane. He seemed to equivocate and said that maybe the pavement wasn't properly stressed for it. We also spoke of brush and tree clearing that would improve sightlines. Last fall, the repaving occurred and no turning lane was incorporated. Making matters worse, the new guardrails make eastbound Route 9 traffic more difficult to see for a southbound car on Whitcombs Mill Road. I had begun to revisit my efforts 3 years ago when I got wind of this housing undertaking and this opportunity to address the situation. Approving this housing development without meaningful safety improvements to the intersection will, without doubt, put its residents continually in harm's way. The increased traffic will also put others, such as the residents on the other side of Route 9 on Daniels Hill Road, Langley Road, and Whitcombs Mill Road, at greater risk. The staff report lacks the hazards of the Route 9 intersection, uses an obviously erroneous AADT of 806 in 2021 on Whitcombs Mill Road at the north end, and makes no mention of Route 9 traffic numbers. Don't take my word for it. Go out and see for yourselves what that using that intersection entails when things get the least bit busy. We all have our horror stories. You may hear some from our neighbors tonight. Josh Meehan, a neighbor who was the Keene Housing Authority director, and his son were almost killed last year when they were rear-ended while waiting to make the turn up toward Daniels Hill Road from Route 9. He is in Denver on business and unable to be here, and while naturally supportive of additional housing development, wanted me to quote him as saying, "I agree, though, that improved traffic mitigation at an already busy, dangerous intersection should be part of the plan you're discussing presently." I personally am supportive of the additional housing and have no problem with its siting, but not at personal risk to its occupants or the neighbors up the hill, including my family. A dedicated turning lane, better sightlines, increased tarmac, a speed limit change, warning lights, significant signage, maybe all the above. These are some of the possible improvements. My neighbors may have other ideas, but saving lives must take priority over expediency, which until now has been the name of the game. This project should not be approved until meaningful safety changes are made to the Whitcombs Mill Road Route 9 intersection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Anyone else?
My name's Terry Woodbeck. I live at 85 Whitcombs Mill Road, going up Whitcombs Mill, first place on the right-hand side. We retired and moved to Keene from Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2018. Purchased the land there, love living there, but am deathly afraid of that intersection. Within the last year, I came 2 times, almost being rear-ended to the point where the driver went around me on the right-hand side, hit the guardrails, moved over, did a 360 in the middle of Highway 9. Luckily, no one was coming from the other direction. Luckily, he did not hit me, but he damaged his car tremendously. I have witnessed or come upon accidents there with motorcycles, with cars, with people turning. And I have no problem with the development of that land. My problem is we have a problem with that intersection currently. And when you start adding the number of additional housing units and cars in that area, it is going to be very, very dangerous. And I think that before you can move forward with that, you have to come up with an answer as to how you're going to help that intersection. And I don't know how you do it. Turning lanes would definitely work. I don't think you want to put a stop line in there. I don't know. That's not my bailiwick. That's not my expertise. There is a problem there, and it has to be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Fred Burgess, 184 Daniels Hill Road. I just want to reiterate what's been addressed already, but that intersection is really scary when you come down Whitcomb's Mill Road heading towards the north. At times, I actually travel to work at Cheshire Medical Center going across the road, trying to cross Route 9. And most of the time you can get there, but on weekends, it's incredible the amount of traffic that goes through with no brakes, and trying to get across that is difficult, and frequently I'll resort to going down, use the roundabout, and come back up to get to where I want to go. It's a real hazard, and part of the problem is people come down, the hills there, and you're rising up on a hill to the west, and people, you can't see them if they're coming, and they're coming fast. And so, if you're trying to cross the road, it gets really scary if someone's on the other side and they don't put their blinker on. You don't know what's happening, so it's extremely dangerous at times, and you're sort of playing chicken with the cars. I've lived there for 5 years, and I've noticed that there have been multiple accidents in the region, some of which I've known some of the people involved being seriously injured, and working at the hospital, we always see the trauma come in. It's a bit of a problem. So, I think it's something that needs to be addressed, and with the idea of potentially 12 to 24 more cars using that road, assuming everybody's 12 units, and depending on how many people are living there with their children or whatever, you end up with more cars. There's more traffic flow coming up that way, especially coming across the highway, and that becomes a real problem. There is no turning lane. I think putting a turning lane in would actually even be more hazardous, because now it had people blocking the road, and they definitely have to go another way because you can't really cross the road anymore. In other areas, you see a little more break in the traffic, but when you get down closer to the roundabout there, things kind of pile up sometimes. So I think it's something that needs to be addressed, and the idea of more population and traffic flowing through the area is a real hazard. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Gogolin, or Robert Gogolin. I live at 27 Langley Road in Keene. In 1997, my wife went down the Whitcomb's Mill in the wintertime, and the slope was such that when she put on her brakes, Subaru, all-wheel drive, all the braking and stuff, she just slid out into the road, and a car hit the front of her car another few feet, and it would have T-boned her, and I probably wouldn't have a wife. It is a very, very dangerous intersection, and the big problem is that you got cars going in both directions at high speed. And I almost always get off of 9 onto Daniels Hill Road, which is coming out of Keene. It's the earlier exit, and it's at an angle. And I almost always do everything I can to time it so that I don't have to stop in the road. And so I'm sure that oncoming cars sometimes think that, oh, what do you do, pull in front of me? Because I'm much more afraid of being shoved into the cars that are coming the other direction than I am about my inability to judge that intersection. And if I can't, then I'll go up to Whitcomb's Mill Road and take the left there. And it's just as crazy because the cars that are behind you just consider that breakdown lane a 55-mile-an-hour road. And so the whole thing is incredibly dangerous, and there have been way too many accidents. Pretty sure there's been at least one fatality since I've lived there about 30 years ago. So I think that this is an opportune time to look at it. And there's been some suggestions. I would also suggest that maybe some signage that says no passing on the right in both directions, because people shouldn't just zoom by. And if they didn't zoom by, there'd be an easier opportunity for people to get out of the road in the middle. But in any case, traffic engineers are smarter than me about those kind of things. But we really should take this opportunity with this development. Again, I emphasize, I'm not against the development itself. We need housing, that's fine. But it's a funny road with the single-lane bridge, and now this with increased traffic that's going to be exiting up through onto Route 9. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment?
Hello, my name is Sandy Vandekouter, and I live at 38 Felt Road. Felt is the name of Whitcomb's Mill once you cross Arch Street. Just for the record, we need housing, not in favor of this particular project. But I also have concerns about traffic. And I've listened to my neighbors talk about it coming from the Daniels Hill and Langley roads. I'm here to talk about coming at it from the other direction, the direction that the residents of this new housing development will be coming at it from. I'm talking about coming at it from the Felt Road area going up to Route 9. Since the most recent crash at that area, the guardrail, which was destroyed, has been replaced. This is fairly recent. The new guardrail is so high that now you can't see traffic at all coming from the Brattleboro area, coming from the west into Keene. It's extraordinary. It's more dangerous than ever. And you don't have to take my word for it. I was there this morning. I took a couple of pictures. I'm happy to submit them, put them into the record. The first one is taken showing exactly where my car was stopped. You can see that I've gone beyond the stop sign because you can't see anything if you don't do that. Here's going even so far that you can't see the stop sign anymore. If you are paying a lot of attention, you can see one of the cars coming, the one that's so close that you'd be a complete fool to make a left turn to go into Keene in front of. I'm going to ask you to squint really hard and see how long it takes you to see the second car, the one behind it. It's a pretty serious evolution that's happened at that intersection. So dangerous that we recently had this crash resulting in the new guardrail. The improvement is anything but. Now, I understand this is a state road. That's a huge problem. But surely you have authority and can bring to bear more pressure than mere mortals who simply live in the area. I concur with all my neighbors who say that taking care of the really obvious problems at this intersection would be wise in any event, but especially if we're going to add additional drivers to the area. They need to be protected too. Thanks.
Yeah, if you'd like, you can just hand those around. We'll take a look at them. Anyone else like to speak on this?
I lied. I'm not really here for this, but I wanted to give the board a little bit of history. 25 years ago, when Langdon Place was built, we had the same exact discussion about the traffic on Route 9. And as most of you know, Route 9 is a state highway. It is not a city highway. We don't maintain it. We can't say what goes on there. So the best thing to do about that, and I'm not sure where the planning board wants to go with that, or the city for that matter, but there can be a request made by the Department of Transportation to do a study at that particular intersection. And after hearing everybody speak tonight, that might be something that could be considered. So there's a main big difference between city roads, as you all know, and state roads. We can only make decisions about city roads. And it's 25 years later, we're having the same discussion about that intersection and a couple of other intersections on Route 9. So I just wanted to provide you with that information. I forgot to give my name, Pam Slack, and I live in Keene. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Hansel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Slack, for sort of setting the table a little bit there. It is a state highway, and so the purview of the planning board is somewhat limited. While we do have development standards that have to do with traffic, it clearly calls out implications on city, bridges, and intersections. And I'm trying to think of another example. I've been on the board a long time where it has intersected with a state highway or road. And so there might be some parsing through the language that would have to take place if the board wanted to take into consideration that intersection with Route 9. But I can tell you, I think it's obvious that there's some concern about the safety of that intersection, and I'm happy to direct a letter from the mayor's office to the Department of Transportation with the state and see if we can get that addressed. I just don't know if it's something that the planning board's going to really be able to help with tonight.
Councilor Remy?
Thank you, and I appreciate the mayor saying that, because I actually had started drafting a letter to direct the mayor to do that on behalf of city council, but if he's going to do it on his own, then it would be coming from city council, but works either way.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lily Swanberg. I live at 19 Felt Road. I am currently 17 years old, and I'm still learning how to drive. But I had one experience that I would like to bring to light in this conversation. The first time that I drove from Keene to make that right turn onto Whitcombs Mill Road, I thought I was gonna die. I was driving with my dad, who sat back there, and there was this massive truck that was coming right at us, and I was terrified, and it was not great. So there's another example, so thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, unless someone raises their hand, I'm going to close the public comment portion for today. Oh, yes, Jim, go ahead.
Jim Fippard, again, on behalf of the applicant. I feel I need to at least respond to what I've heard. Over a year ago, when the city council was discussing the rezoning of this property from rural to low density 1, the issue of the Route 9 intersection was raised. In fact, I think Councilor Jones voted against the rezoning because of that safety concern. After that hearing, I contacted District 4, New Hampshire DOT, which is our local district, and talked to the driveway supervisor about what I was proposing on Whitcombs Mill Road, and that we'd be introducing 12 more living units that would be generating more traffic. I already had preliminary information from our traffic engineer, so I knew the peak hour traffic volumes were 8 to 10 cars. And so I shared that information with the driveway supervisor, and he said, Jim, there's nothing, you need nothing from New Hampshire DOT. You're under the thresholds. I appreciate the information, and he put it in our file, but they can't ask us to do anything because those volumes are just too low. That still doesn't address the safety issues. He said if I wanted to come forward and pay for improvements to the intersection, to improve visibility, or to add lanes, to add capacity, or a turning lane, and I'm familiar with all those measures, it just isn't in the budget for a 12-lot subdivision. It's just not possible. So I too will join in approaching DOT and expressing concerns, because I don't want to create something that's going to take somebody's life or cause additional hazards. I always try to address these problems and solve these problems. So I'll help express the concerns, but, and you already heard from Pam Slack, thank you, Pam, it's just not in your jurisdiction to address a problem on a state highway. But you can bring it to the attention of New Hampshire DOT, and that probably is part of your job, and that's appropriate, and I would support that. So I'm hoping we can move forward with our conditional approval tonight, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm really going to close the public comment portion.
Do I get a second chance?
Yes.
To say,
Make a point that it is within your bailiwick to,
okay, please come forward then.
I think what you're punting. I mean, you're saying, there's nothing we can do. What I am saying is, by allowing for this development to happen, you are putting 12 households at risk. I'll go on record at saying that. I won't be around to say I told you so. As me, my family, and my neighbors on the other side of the road, you do have that control right now to say, we should wait. We'd have, it's not right to subject these folks, the new tenants, the residents, to an unacceptable risk. You do have that control. You're punting. If you just say, well, we can't do it, it's a state, you can control the development on Wickham's Mill Road presently, right now, tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, this will be the last one.
Sure. Bob Gogolin again. I don't know the rules and the laws, but you could, for example, shut the end of Wickham's Mill Road off from Route 9. There's other ways to get to Keene. There's other ways to get around. So it's not like the city has no say in dealing with a dangerous intersection. And likewise, you could do the same thing on Daniels Hill, on Wickham's Mill Road on the other side, because there is another way of getting out of the area with the Daniel Hill Road. So please consider, don't just, as Walt said, punt. Consider that you look into what your options are to see what you can do, see how much influence, see how much pressure you can put on the state. We should all be doing this cooperatively. There's the state, there's the Southwest Planning, there's the city of Keene. Work on the problem, solve the problem, don't just punt. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Hansel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I'm not trying to say that there's nothing the city can do. It's a question of whether or not the planning board has any sort of jurisdiction to really do anything. We're not a legislative body. We're a quasi-judicial body that's tasked with taking the 12 development standards for our site plan review process and applying those standards to what the applicant has submitted and what they present. If you want the city to take more aggressive action in pressuring the state to do anything, you would need to go through the city council process. And I'd suggest if a letter from the mayor's office to try and put pressure on the DOT is not satisfying to you, then you write a letter to the city council, submit it through the city clerk's office. It'll come up on the city council agenda, and then that legislative body can decide what they want to do with it, if anything. But it's just not really in the purview of the planning board.
Thank you. Okay, so now the public comment portion is closed, and we move to deliberation. So is there a motion for this application?
Do we need a motion on the waiver request first?
On the waiver request?
Yes, we do.
So I would move to grant a waiver from section 19.3.5.a.3 of the Land Development Code regarding the requirement that all structures be accessed from internal streets to allow access to Lot 8 from Whitcomb's Mill Road.
I'll second that.
Second, thank you. Any discussion? Councilor Remy?
Thank you. As far as the conditions on this, I do think that there would be an unnecessary hardship to try to eliminate that lot completely, which would be the requirement if this waiver was not granted. And I think on some of the other conditions they've shown within their application, some good reasons why that lot would be justified.
Okay, so all those approving the waiver request? So moved.
I have a second motion, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, please.
This one's going to take a little while. I would move to approve S-03-23 and SWP-CUP-02-23 for a 9-lot conservation residential development subdivision and surface water protection conditional use permit. All as presented on the plan set identified as Whitcomb Mill Estates, 19 Whitcomb's Mill Road, Keene, New Hampshire, prepared by Huntley Survey and Design, SVE Associates, and Brickstone Land Use Consultants. Dated March 12th, 2023, and last revised on May 3rd, 2023, with the following conditions. A, prior to final approval and signature by Planning Board Chair, the following conditions precedent shall be met. 1, the owner's signature appears on plan. 2, submittal of 4 full-size paper copies, 2 Mylar copies, and a digital copy of a final plan. 3, submittal of a check in the amount of $51 be made out to the City of Keene to cover the cost of recording the final plan. 4, inspection of lot monuments by the Public Works Director or their designee following the installation or the submittal of a security in an amount deemed satisfactory to the Public Works Director to ensure that the monuments will be set. 5, submittal of written draft documentation for any legal instruments required for this application, which shall be subject to review and approval by the city attorney. 6, the application shall revise the subdivision plan to indicate no cut zones on all land within 30 feet of designated surface waters. A provision granting authority to the homeowners association to maintain and regulate the no-cut zone shall be included in the HOA covenants. 7, in accordance with RSA 674-36-4, the applicant has offered to install fire suppression sprinkler systems in the proposed 1- and 2-family residences, and the planning board has accepted this offer. The applicant shall add a note to the subdivision plan which states that the installation of individual residential sprinkler systems meet the standards of NFPA 13D or NFPA 13R or other means of fire protection approved by the Keene Planning Board shall be required for each lot shown on the plan. 8, the applicant shall obtain approval from the City of Keene City Council for all necessary waivers from Article 22 of the Land Development for the proposed new street design. 9, the applicant shall obtain approval from the City Council for the layout of the new street and shall post adequate security for the construction of the same to be approved by the city engineer and community development director. B, subsequent to final approval, the following conditions shall be met. 1, prior to commencing construction of the road, the Community Development Department shall be notified when all erosion control measures are installed, and the Community Development Director or their designee shall inspect the erosion control measures to ensure compliance with this subdivision plan and all the City of Keene regulations. 2, the applicant shall obtain final acceptance of the new street from the City Council following completion of all infrastructure construction. 3, prior to the issuance of a CO for each lot, the submittal of written documentation of a restrictive covenant or other legal mechanism in the chain of title for each new proposed lot to ensure the installation of individual residential sprinkler systems meeting the standards of NFPA 13D or NFPA 13R or other means of fire protection approved by the Keene Planning Board shall be required. This documentation shall be subject to review and final approval by the city attorney.
Second.
Second, thank you. Any further discussion? Counselor Remy?
Thank you. I think this may be a question for staff, just based on the fact that in our packets that we were provided, there are multiple dates of some of these, the drawings that we've been provided. I just want to confirm that the final revision on May 3rd, 2023 is the correct date with the layout that we've been presented with tonight.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you, because some of the older ones are from March and
Yeah.
show the 9th lot, and that's
Yep.
where I just wanted to, okay.
Absolutely.
Confirm.
Any other discussion?
Thank
Mr.
you.
Lancy?
So I went to the site with David as well, and I took a walk down the rail trail prior to checking the site out, and my main concern with the site as it is people cutting into the lot through their property line through the common area. And so I didn't know if I could make an amendment to the cut area of no cut zone. Is that something I can do?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, you can certainly make an amendment to the motion, and then we'd have to vote on your amendment to include it in the proposed motion that we would then make a final vote on.
Yeah, because I know the state has requirements, but as we found out, they don't keep track of people blazing trails through and charging them the $50 a year to have the trail. So I'd like to make a motion that the cut zone include the 10 feet or a buffer zone where the rail trail meets this property, except for the area where the proposed trail is.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, please.
One of the approved uses of the open space lot is hiking and recreation through the lot itself. So I just wanted to clarify that.
In addition, the sort of definition of the no-cut zone is really trees. So along with that, you could really wind your way through on a trail. So it's particularly difficult for us to legislate no access between those two parcels. It's really, because it's two private property owners, the state is not really a private property owner, but it's two property owners, that's a civil issue between those two property owners trespass. So it's hard for us to regulate that particular use.
But since they would get that information about the wetland area not being a cut zone, I think just them hearing would help prevent, blazing of trails. It's already happening on many of our trails with the mountain bikers and stuff like that. So any prevention, I think, would help. I don't see, it being a bad thing to put this in there. So I continue with my amendment, my motion for amendment.
Okay. Is there a second to the Mr. Clancy's amendment?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, the amendment is not approved. Now we're back to the original motion for the application. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we have one more agenda item, or public hearing item. I'll give folks a second to exit.
Does this get left for the record, or?
That's fine, you can do that. You can give it to me, or, okay. Okay. Moving on to SPR-06-23, site plan, Roosevelt School Housing at 438 Washington Street. Applicant, Monadnock Affordable Housing. On behalf of owner Community College System of New Hampshire, proposes to renovate the existing 13,507 square foot, two-story school building, construct an 8,548 square foot, two-story addition, and construct a 12,646 square foot, two-story building with associated site improvements to create a 60-unit multifamily housing development on the property at 438 Washington Street. This is TMP number 531-054-000. A waiver is requested from section 20.14.3.d of the Land Development Code regarding the requirement that all off-street parking be screened and located to the side or rear of buildings. This site is 2.4 acres and is located in the low-density district. May I ask staff if they have a recommendation for completeness?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant requests an exemption from submitting a screening analysis. After reviewing the request, staff has determined that exempting the applicant from submitting this information would have no bearing on the merits of the application and recommends that the planning board grant this exemption and accept the application as complete.
Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the application as complete?
Mr.
Mayor
Chairman, I
Hansel.
would move to find the application complete.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion is, the application is accepted as complete. At this time, I'd like to ask the applicant to present.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name's Chris Netto. I'm with Novus Group.
I'm Chris Coates. I am Chair of the Keene Housing Board of Commissioners.
So again, Keene Housing is proposing 60 units at 438 Washington Street. The site's a little under 2.5 acres. Is the former Roosevelt School. So we're proposing to actually build the project in 2 phases. The first phase would be a demolition of the gym and renovation of the existing school building, plus the addition of about 8,500 square feet. So that'll result in 30 units in phase 1. All the site work will be done in phase 1 as well. And then phase 2 is a second new building behind the existing building with an additional 30 units. We've designed a parking lot with 60 parking spaces. We did go to the zoning board and received a few variances. The first was for the use, which is not allowed in the low-density district, multifamily use. The second was regarding lot coverage, where we're allowed to have more than the allowed 35% lot coverage. And then the third was actually a special exception from the parking requirement. Normally, it would be required to have 2 parking spaces per unit, which would mean 120 spaces. So we got a special exception for that to go to 70 spaces. As far as stormwater drainage on the site, we've designed a mitigation system, a gallery that's going to be built underneath the parking lot. So everything will run to that system. It will infiltrate into the ground, and then during the larger storm events, it'll overflow into the city's stormwater system on Washington Street. Regarding snow storage, as is consistent with Keene Housing's other sites, the snow will actually be removed from the site. So temporarily stored on the site, and then they'll come in and haul it off after a storm event. We are proposing some screening along the south boundary of the site, and we're proposing a 6-foot-high stockade fence. And that fence will go along the entire southern boundary, which is there's no residence abutting that. Actually wrap around the sort of southwest. There's a residence on the southwest side of the site as well. And then we start getting elevation between the next house to the sort of northwest and certainly along Woodbury. Both of those are at least 10 to 12 feet higher than the site, so they're pretty well buffered already. The buildings will be connected to municipal sewer and water. We did submit a traffic study by Steve Perna and Company. That was originally submitted to the zoning board, and then we submitted as part of this application as well. Mr. Perna actually determined that the number of trips during the peak hours is going to be less than what the previous use for the building was. Actually, a reduction in traffic. But on average, it would generate a little bit more traffic off-peak hours. And Mr. Pernock concluded that there was really no adverse impact of this project on traffic flow. He also did support the reduction in parking, which we presented to the zoning board. That's really it. Chris, maybe you have a few things that you'd like to add?
Just a little fillers. As he said, in the first phase, it's 30 units, 22 are one-bedrooms, 8 are two-bedrooms. And as he said, tearing down the gym and renovating, reusing the existing school, and adding new construction onto that. And the second phase would mirror the first phase with 22 one-bedrooms and 8 two-bedrooms on the new construction. The project cost is about $11.5 million per phase. So that's including soft and hard costs. A construction manager has already been selected early to find ways to always look to see if we can push costs down. We're looking at different ways to fund this project: low-income housing tax credit, community development block grants, New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority funds, Monadnock Affordable Housing, corporation loans, energy rebates, applying for Northern Borders Regional Commission's Catalyst funding, and applying for Invest New Hampshire funding. The current demand for Keene Housing is currently over 3,000 households on all of its various wait lists, waiting for studios and one-bedroom apartments. This is our first significant addition to our community's affordable portfolio since Stone Arts Village, which was 15 years ago. Brookbend Brookbend's replaced Cheshire Homes in 2013, and did add about 15 units there. Who will be living in their home? Income eligibility no higher than 60% of the area median income, which is about $57,000 for a family of 4. No age restrictions, but because small unit size combined with our waitlist demographics, we will default to predominantly elderly and disabled residents, but will likely also serve as a workforce housing for some workers without kids or small families. On a side note with that, you build 60, in theory, that opens up 60 because people are coming from someplace. So realistically, you could be looking at a gain of about 120 because people, even though we're only building 60, we're opening it up. And I will tell you, my other hat on, the county administrator's hat, we have about 500 employees. But we have a nursing home that has the 3rd floor that is closed down with 50 beds not being used, which has a ripple effect in itself to the hospital and others, because we can't find dietary aides. We can't find environmental aides, maintenance people, people that earn a decent wage, but not enough and this would help them. I see people in the room that would probably benefit from this type of housing too, with some of the workforce that they're looking for. Typically, how much does typically around 30% of their income, with the difference between how much they will pay is typically around 30% of their income, with the difference between tenant rent and operating costs coming from HUD project-based voucher programs. We will have a resident service coordinator that will have office hours to organize and host resident activities, provide stabilization services for anyone who needs them, and make service referrals as needed. Community gardens are part of our properties, and a garden is part of the design. Our community garden helps residents plan and care for their gardens, and you'll know that if you look at the Central Square and the work that they've done there with the gardens there and all of our programs. So just wanted to put that in. I also wanted to recognize that Susan Shaw, Pam Slack, 2 members of the Keene Housing Board of Commissioners are here too, back there. And that we're here to answer any questions you may have. But we feel like this is a great opportunity for the community to add these 60 units.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Councilor Remy?
Thank you. It looks like it from the drawing, but just for clarity, the northeast entrance would be one-way?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one way, and it comes into angled parking, which is one way in front of the building, which we're asking for a waiver for the parking in front of the building. And then the southerly access is full access, one incoming and 2 outgoing lanes.
Understood. The Woodbury Street is the concern, that corner is tough on Woodbury. I imagine it would be just as tough here with Blind Corner, so appreciate that.
My question's along the same lines, because I see striping or pavement markings for the other entrance exit. I assume you're gonna have pavement markings for the one-way and signage, but I didn't see it on the plan. Maybe I missed it.
Yep, it definitely have one-way signage. On the plan, we could add an arrow, a painted arrow at the entrance of that incoming driveway that might clarify better for people.
The signage is satisfactory to the staff. I'm fine with it. I just wanted to make sure we were having it documented, that's all.
This staff believes that the signage is sufficient. For somebody to make it all the way to that enter-only site access, they would be going very wrong way for a significant portion of their travel along the site.
Mr. Orgaz?
Thank you. More of a comment than a question, but I did view the site, and I think this is a wonderful repurpose of the site and the building, the existing infrastructure. The beginnings of more of this we'll hopefully be seeing. Thank you.
Mr. Clancy?
I was also at the site, and I think, could you just explain for the public record why it's in 2 phases and the buildings aren't connected?
Sure, that's a financing question, so I'm not qualified to answer that.
It's a finance, but it's also a build-out issue too. You have to build one, and then we can get and then the construction happens. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, correct. You have to, I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
It really is a financing issue. New Hampshire Housing Finance has only allocated so much money, and
Jonathan, could you come up to the microphone for a minute, take care, introduce yourself?
My name is Jonathan Hawley. I'm the architect for the project. It really is a financing issue. New Hampshire Housing Finance has only allocated so much money to invest in these properties.
Correct.
And if they took all that money and put it in one project, they're not spreading it out. So they break it down. Really, the magic number is between 24 and 35 units, and that's what they're comfortable financing. So this is actually a project that we work with NEFA to figure out how to put it together. So it really is 2 phases because of that. And a 2-phase project actually scores better with NEFA. So this is a competitive financing application, and where you already have one phase in the ground, you're more than likely going to get financed for the 2nd phase. So it's a way for NEFA to sort of promote larger projects without financing them all at the same time. Does that answer your question?
Additional questions for the applicant? Mayor Hansel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just maybe for the architect, just to talk a little bit about blending the facade on the new building and how that's going to relate to the existing brick, and what you're doing to sort of make sure that those are work together.
We worked with Lisa Mossoff as a historic preservationist. So part of the application with NEFA is we have to satisfy the requirements of the Division of Historic Resources. We have to do the archaeology and all of that historical piece. You'll see in the video here. So a couple of things came up in the development. Keene has requirements that talk about the fenestration and repeating patterns, if you will. One of the things that came up in the development of this project is, although we're not doing this immediately, we are planning for solar on the roofs. So we discounted the idea of dormers, if you will, from that plan to allow for shed roofs so that all of the roof would support sloped solar panels. And we worked with Lisa. So part of the attitude towards historic preservation is that when you build something, this is a historic building. It does have great importance to DHR and the community. But the historic people look to the new construction to look significantly different. They don't want you to match the vernacular. They don't want it to be brick on brick or mimic that it's a hip roof against a hip roof. They want the history to be told that this is the old building and this is the new building. So part of coming up with these elevations and is truly just that. We wanted it to stand out. We wanted it to look a little more progressive. We want, although this is affordable housing, workforce housing, we don't want it to look like track, quote-unquote, project-based architecture from the 70s. You know, people want to live in nice places, and we can afford to do something special for them. And I think this building projects that, you know, people are going to take great pride in living here. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I'm trying.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I think it does, and I see what you're trying to do. It's just tough with, I think our current architectural and visual standard for the planning board is not consistent with that rationale that you have, or that you were getting from the historic preservationists, so maybe that's something we kind of look at. But I think I can see what you're trying to do here, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, correct. Our standards typically call for kind of fitting in more overtly than what you suggested you were advised to do. Yeah. Okay. I guess that brings us to the staff report.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. As described, it'll be a 60-unit, two-phase project. The first phase consisting of the demolition of the existing gymnasium, the renovation of the remaining school area, as well as the associated site improvements. And then phase two will be the additional 30-unit freestanding building. As described, the drainage stormwater management system will be primarily an underground vault with an overflow into the existing stormwater line under Washington Street. City engineering is comfortable with that, and it appears the standard has been met. The erosion control plan submitted with the plan set includes the usage of tracking pads for the construction entrances, inlet protection for the existing and proposed catch basins, and sediment control logs or other equivalent features around the perimeter of the property, and that standard appears to be met. Snow storage and removal is described as functionally the same as other Keene housing projects, and that appears to be set. The landscaping plan consists of the installation of 33 shade trees, 234 shrubs and bushes, and 68 perennials and annuals for a total of 525 individual plantings. Planting details have been submitted and appear to meet best practices. No invasive species are proposed to be installed, and protective fencing is shown around existing trees that will remain on the site. It does appear that the standard will be met. I would like to note that the existing trees along Washington Street are in a serious state of decline and will be removed and then replaced with proposed shade trees on the landscaping plan. Screening, the submitted landscaping plan, as I just described, depicts the usage of flowering evergreen shrubs along the Washington Street public right-of-way. That wasn't shown in the video, but in addition to the shade trees, there will be that evergreen buffer. And then shade trees along the entryway with Woodbury Street. So as those trees mature, the tree the leaf canopy will screen the development from Woodbury Street as it continues in elevation as it moves away from Washington Street. A 6-foot stockade fence is proposed along the southern property line as described by the applicant. A dumpster enclosure is proposed to be located in the south of the proposed new building and enclosed with a 6-foot stockade fence meeting our standards. So it appears that the screening standards have been met. Lighting plan depicts the proposal to install 8 pole-mounted light fixtures and 23 wall-mounted light fixtures. The pole-mounted fixtures will be 15 feet in height as dictated by zoning, and the wall-mounted fixtures will be installed between 10 and 15 feet in height as necessary. All proposed fixtures will have a color rendering index of 80 and a color temperature of 3000 Kelvin, All fixtures will be full cutoff LEDs and appear to meet our standards. As the applicant has stated, municipal water and sewer will be utilized for the project with a separate water service line for the fire suppression system. An average sewer flow calculation was submitted to engineering for review, and that estimates the redevelopment will generate about 9,600 gallons per day of effluent into the city's sewer system, and a DES sewer connection permit will be required for this application. However, the proposal appears to meet our sewer and water standards. Traffic and access management, the proposed development intends to utilize the 2 existing site access points along Washington Street. So those will not be moved around. The patterns in and out of the site will remain as historically was. As the applicant stated, there might be some slight shift in I believe it's either the AM and the PM peaks. However, the overall amount of trips will actually be reduced with this site uses versus the community college use that it is replacing. The report states that, so it'll be about 34 AM trips, 28 PM trips, and the report states that developments that generate fewer than 50 vehicle trips per hour are considered to be very low volume traffic generators. The parking is sufficient for the site, and the applicant, as described, has received a variance and a special exception to accommodate that. A truck turning exhibit was prepared and demonstrates that emergency service vehicles can navigate safely throughout the site. And that exhibit utilizes the City of Concord, New Hampshire's Tower 1 ladder truck, which is the biggest truck in their fleet. So it should be able to accommodate whatever we have. It appears that standard is met. Filling and excavation, the applicant states in their narrative that filling and excavation operations are anticipated to be consistent with other construction projects of similar size. Excavation will be required to install building foundations, utilities, and stormwater, and then fill material brought in to construct the parking lots. Considering the site's proximity with direct access to New Hampshire Route 10 to the north and 101 to the south through the city center, it should have no issues with large construction vehicles entering and exiting the site and impacting the neighborhood. It appears this has been met, excuse me. Surface waters and wetlands, there are no surface waters or wetlands on the site. It's not applicable. In regards to hazardous and toxic materials, the applicant's due diligence is commendable. The applicant states in their narrative that a Phase 1 environmental site assessment was prepared by the Novus Group in December of 2022. And the assessment revealed that a recognized environmental condition associated with a dry cleaning facility located at 9 Griffin Street was detected. A soil gas assessment was scheduled for 17th of May to rule out any potential soil gas contamination from the dry cleaning facility. And then also a hazardous building material assessment was conducted for the existing building. The applicant has noted that all identified hazardous building materials will be abated during the demolition process by a licensed abatement contractor, and no other hazardous or toxic materials are anticipated to be found or stored on the site. It appears that this standard has been met. And then, the applicant states in their narrative in regards to noise that the development is expected to be a low-volume traffic generator and is unlikely to increase noise levels in the neighborhood. The site will be subject to the city's existing noise ordinance. And then they do go on to note that considering significant portion of the population will be elderly and persons with disabilities. It is further anticipated to be a relatively quiet development, and it appears to meet our standards. So what I am going to ask you to deliberate on, which some of you have already noted on, is going to be the architecture and visual appearance. I have provided a couple of our standards that I believe are most relevant to the proposed design of the buildings, including front facades and exterior walls shall be articulated to express an identity. Structures shall have architectural features that make them visually interesting. Architectural features shall conform to accepted architectural principles of design and construction. And then exterior materials, textures, and colors shall minimize visual aggressiveness and shall harmonize with the city's distinct architectural identity. It'll be up to you all to determine if this proposal meets those. And then I would like to just quickly note the waiver. The section that the waiver is asking for, is coming from, does talk about screening of parking as well as the location of parking. The applicant has proposed screening that meets this standard. However, the applicant is requesting a waiver from the location of those parking areas, which says that they must be to the side or the rear of the building. As you can see, there is parking in front of both the existing and proposed addition and the proposed future building. So you will need to determine strict conformity with proposed unnecessary hardship and specific circumstances related to the site plan or condition of the land indicate that a waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations. Before I go into the recommended motion, does anybody have any questions for me at this time?
I have a question. Evan, the soil gas assessment, was that completed, and are there any findings to report?
One of the conditions that of approval that we're proposing is a copy of that assessment. I cannot speak. It was scheduled to be done on the 17th, which is before this meeting, but I haven't heard from the applicant regarding it since then.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't gotten the results of the tests back yet, so once we have those, we'll write up a report and submit to the
Thank you.
owner and the board.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, questions for staff? Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have we resolved the issue, or the belonging of the retaining wall and who's responsible for the repairs?
My
On the north
understanding
side.
is that is correct. And before the property is going to change ownership, the current owner is going to perform the repairs onto the retaining wall. Yeah, so that's a condition of the P&S agreement for the property.
Any other questions for staff? Councilor Remy?
Thank you. I don't know if this is for staff or potentially could be for the applicant, but looking at the design conditions, just the biggest one for me, thinking about, are there similar types of buildings in Keene that are of a similar design and layout that this would fit in with? That's the only one. I can't think of a building that's similar, but I also, it's kind of close to some of the railroad land properties. That's kind of where my head goes, is some of the railroad properties, but I'm trying to think of where it might fit in with similar design, but.
Yeah, I can't speculate to different locations within the city itself. I have seen designs like this in other modern-day developments. So it does seem to be a current architectural practice.
Would the applicant care to comment on that?
You know, as I said earlier, you know, working with DHR, anything attached to the original Roosevelt School building is considered an adverse effect. So they come back and they basically, working with them, we developed these elevations, they reviewed them, we go back and forth. Part of part of satisfying DHR, we will have to do an interpretive display inside the school, which basically will be some sort of visual graphic, if you will, that will tell the history of the school, when it was built, you know, the thousands of kids that went through it, all that kind of thing. But specifically to the vernacular of the building, you know, the roof forms, the massing of the building was derived from the requirement of maximizing the solar down the road. The building's being designed for that, so, and when you end up with these sort of shed components, you don't have sort of that dormer end sticking up. So, I mean, it's an aesthetic that, you know, some people might like and some people may not like. It's no different than you might not like your neighbor's blue house and mine's white. I mean, I don't know how to specifically address. It's intentionally designed to look different than Roosevelt School for the compliance with the historic piece.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
And
I can clarify my question a little bit. There's a specific line that says, "and shall harmonize with the city's distinctive architectural identity and unique character." I'm not specifying, I don't think it needs to look like Roosevelt School. I'm not asking it to, but it's that within the city that there's a character and feel similar to this design. I don't think it's a no. Looking at it, it looks nice, and I think it would fit in with the neighborhood. I think the video was very helpful to understand what that would look like in place.
all
But I
of
just
them
am
is-
trying to address that particular line, and I didn't know if you had put any thought to that particular sentence.
No, I mean, the building is a series of, it's affordable housing, so we don't have a lot of latitude in terms of articulating the floor plan in and out. Every corner costs the extra dollar. So the bump outs that you see are bay components that protrude forward. The materials on the outside of the building, there is a brick base along the bottom of the front of the building along Washington Street to give it some tie-in to the school. But then the remainder of the siding materials are clapboard, board and batten, things that you would see similar to the homes that run up and down Washington Street. So I don't think the materials are gonna be anything different than what are there. I think it's difficult to see it, you're viewing it now from bird's eye view above. So, I mean, when you're driving along at street level and you're viewing it at 6 feet off grade, it's gonna come across very different. I do think there's a couple of, if you back the video up a little bit, you might begin to see that the, you don't see that articulation from a bird's eye view, if you will.
Go ahead.
I think that was very helpful. And even seeing it again, seeing that you're playing off the brick, playing off of some of the other components that are similar to other architecture that is in Keene. To your point, I think there are different buildings in Keene with all of those different siding types and those different siding looks, and it's kind of bringing that together into one place. So, trying to look for how it fits in.
Sure.
Okay. Mayor Hansel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick comment on, the architectural appearance is always the most difficult for the board to sort of like wrestle with. And if it's helpful, my thought processes on this issue are obviously looking at the standard and trying to pick out things, as Councilor Remy just did, where you can sort of tie it together. But also looking at just the massing and I see a couple of elements that they are taking from the existing building and from some of the surrounding buildings around, like the brick facade as a base. The mass of the building in comparison to the mass of the other building, I see that as part of the style or of similar character to other buildings in the area. And so that's how I'm like reading it right now, if that's helpful to other board members.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll just briefly do the motion and the conditions of approval, thankfully shorter than the last application. So owner's signature for precedent conditions, owner's signature on the plans, submittal to security for sedimentation, erosion control, landscaping, and as-built, hard copies, A copy of the NHDES sewer connection permit shall be submitted to the Department of Public Works. A copy of that soil gas assessment shall be submitted to the Community Development Department. And then percolation tests for the proposed stormwater management system shall be conducted and their results submitted to the city engineer for review and approval. And then subsequent to final approval, prior to the commencement of site work, an excavation permit and utility connection permit shall be obtained from the Department of Public Works. And then prior to the commencement of site work, the Community Development Department shall be notified when all erosion control measures are installed, and the Community Development Director or their designee shall inspect those measures to ensure compliance with the site plan and all the city's regulations.
Thanks, Evan. Hold on just one sec. Before we move into deliberation, just wanted to ask if there was anyone from the public who wanted to comment. Please come forward and state your name and address.
Hello,
Hello?
my name's Tammy Adams. I'm an alternate member of this body, and I'm also an abutter. And I'd like to say what an outstanding choice for this eyesore of a property in my neighborhood. I think in regards to your current discussions and your questions, there's no other building in the area like it. So it's apples and oranges in that neighborhood. The houses across the street are kind of run down at this point. So I think any kind of new and improvement in my neighborhood is just going to be awesome. And we're going to have housing for people. That is such, it's just something that we need to do. I'm glad that you brought up the retaining wall, because that's scary. So I'm glad that's being taken care of. The animation was outstanding. That was really helpful to see. And I'm really excited for this to happen. In the paperwork, I noticed that in regards to the foliage, the green of the property, there's some very mature trees in the back of the property, and I was really hoping that the owners will stay true to their statement in the plan that they'll retain some of those very old oak trees. So, the retaining wall, the housing, it's great. Let's get on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay, I'm going to close the public portion right now. And Councilor Remy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only question I have, in the proposed motion, we comment on a copy of the soil gas assessment shall be submitted. Does it need to be like a satisfactory one? Because what if it fails? I'm not familiar enough with what a soil gas assessment's going to come back with to understand.
I would defer to the
Yeah,
applicant's
we would need a
engineer to
remediation
discuss that
plan
further.
depending on the results.
If you don't mind, Chris.
Sure, not at all. So, yeah, if we got negative results that showed that the gas vapor was migrating, there are several ways to deal with that safely. Much like a radon system in a person's home, could either put an active or a passive gas management system around the foundations, and actually a barrier so that the vapors would not get inside the building. Lots of ways to deal with it. It's certainly not a deal killer. If we do find some vapors migrating, we can deal with them now before the buildings get constructed.
Please.
Clarifying on that. So in that case, that adding that on there would be likely regulated by DES, or is that regulated by our body to make sure that that's mitigated? Because I'm sure you don't want to build on that.
Yeah, so it would be regulated by the state because of ambient air quality standards required.
Okay.
And it would be required by the people financing the property or the
Understood.
project.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, perhaps we should just add that statement to the condition.
I was just saying I'm comfortable leaving it out because it is regulated
Okay.
by the state,
All right.
from my perspective. That's where I was
Fine.
trying to make sure that it was, that the mitigation strategy had to exist if there was a problem, but it sounds like
Okay.
there has to be.
Good. I think we're ready for the motion at this point.
Okay, so first of all, I would move to grant a waiver from section 20.14.3.d of the Land Development Code regarding the requirement that all off-street parking be located to the side or rear of the buildings.
Second, and just as means of comment, saying that I agree with the fact that preserving the existing building is requiring and allowing them to have that parking out there. It would be a hardship to not remain there, because you'd have to do something with the building.
Good. Okay. All those in favor of the waiver request? Any opposed? Okay. Motion is granted. Now the motion itself for the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move to approve SPR-06-23 as shown on the plan identified as Roosevelt School Housing, 438 Washington Street, Keene, New Hampshire, prepared by Novus Group at a scale of 1 inch equals 30 feet, dated April 12, 2023, and last revised May 8, 2023, and the architectural elevations prepared by Warren Street Architects at a scale of 1/8 inch equals 1 foot, dated May 8th, 2023, with the following conditions. 1, prior to final approval and signature by Planning Board Chair, the following conditions precedent shall be met. A, the owner's signature shall appear on the plan set. B, submittal of security for sedimentation and erosion control, landscaping, and as-built plans in the form of and amount that's acceptable to the city engineer. C, submittal of 5 full-size paper copies and 1 digital copy of the final plan. D, a copy of the NHDES sewer connection permit shall be submitted to the Department of Public Works. E, a copy of the soil gas assessment shall be submitted to the Community Development Department. F, percolation tests for the proposed stormwater management system shall be conducted and their results submitted to the city engineer for review and approval. 2, subsequent to final approval and signature by the Planning Board Chair, the following conditions shall be met. A, prior to commencement of site work, the excavation permit and utility connection permit shall be obtained from the Department of Public Works. B, prior to the commencement of site work, the Community Development Department shall be notified when all erosion control measures are installed, and the Community Development Director or their designee shall inspect those erosion control measures to ensure compliance with the site plan and all City of Keene regulations.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of the application, the motion? Any opposed? Motion is passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys sticking around. Okay, can we, staff have anything to report on updates?
We do not.
Any items of new business that the board members or staff would like to bring forward? It's a little late, but I did have discussions with the planning group about some of the OPD, the Office of Planning at the state. They had a couple of seminars, and the material is available online. I think Mary's probably going to send out a link to everyone.
Yeah, we did send a link out to the training materials and the agenda packet in the initial
Oh,
email
okay,
that went
all right,
out,
good.
so, yeah.
I didn't quite get to page 105, I guess. All right, the following are upcoming dates of interest for the planning board. Joint Committee of the Planning Board and PLD, June 12th. Planning Board Steering Committee, June 13. Planning Board Site Visit, June 21, to be confirmed. Next Planning Board meeting here at 6:30 on June 26th. Unless anyone else has something else, I would like to adjourn this meeting at 9:04 PM. Thanks, everybody.